We're smooth. 98.1 FM is gone 2 minutes already past the hour of 9 o'clock. It is a Tuesday, day two, as the Nigerian Labour Congress and its counterpart, the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, are staging the protest already. Well, we're counting the losses already on the first day, and the government is saying after what they've seen on the first day, it's simply, guys, can you come over to the table and let's talk these things over? Let's jaw, and let's not cripple or bring the economy to a standstill. And then begin to think of how they can restart the economy again with a battery or probably jumpstart the economy, as it always happens after strikes of this nature. None of the sectors from the feelers from across the country spared yesterday, from the seaports to the airports at Abuja and Lagos. Our travelers had different tales to tell of the losses, appointments missed already. These are the issues arising. But the question again is, wasn't there enough time to have averted what we've seen on the first day and then also getting into the second day? And we're waiting for labor. By 9, as it is right now, they're into their neck meeting and we're waiting with bated breath what that outcome would be. If the organs of labor would say, okay, go back to the table and talk with your employer. That's where we are right now. But let's pick up the slacks from the events of yesterday and get a guest in here. Our public affairs analyst will be speaking with us this morning. A special guest, Biodun Sowunmi, is here ready, joining us virtually. Good morning to you, Biodun.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, you're welcome. So first, for starters, let's understand what's the situation like. What was it like yesterday for you? Were you caught up in the web of the activities of labor's strike yesterday? Just walk us through your own experience.
Yes, there was a good compliance with the strike call by the labor unions. And initially, many people were a bit reluctant to stock up until later in the morning towards 12, when people realized that something that is going to be a total shutdown. And then you now see people rushing to buy things here, left, right, and center. So I had to go to the filling station, fill my car to the brim, and then try and buy some petrol to use with the generator at home. Because by then, the national grid was already off. So there was a queue and all that at the petrol station, people panic buying, getting ready, in case the strike gets prolonged. But yesterday also, I drove around and I noticed that the Lagos State University Teaching Hospital, was without light, and I learned it also affected load, which is quite unfortunate. Because diesel is very expensive, and many hospitals did not prepare, to spend the kind of resources which are now required when there's a total strike, because the IPP could not supply last suit as the workers were on strike.
Okay, so it looks, we've seen from the pictures you painted already, we can now see what it looks like if we were to go into day 2 or even a day 3 eventually. But as he's everything with us, Nigeria, for some parts, we might just simply want to say, God forbid, with the snapped fingers around our heads. But today, let's look at NLC, the Nigerian Labour Congress TUC strike, and the way forward right now. So how has the role of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC evolved over the years, and the impact on labor relations in Nigeria?
Yeah, when you go back into history, you realize that we've had crops of labor leaders who are quite very brilliant on dealing with labor matters. To start with, I would query Joe Ajero's leadership competence on labor matters. The simple reason is this: you do not start a negotiation asking for 1 million naira as minimum wage. And that is not even the minimum salary to be paid to any workers. You are talking about the national minimum wage. The moment you do that, you lose everybody straight away. And they manage to alienate so many not only the employers in the organized private sectors, but also in government and also individuals within the country, because it's quite unreasonable. We cannot be heading towards Venezuela, where you need a whole box loads of naira of currency, just to buy bread. That is not the economy we want. Then one would also expect that the labor leaders need to understand that whatever you get with one hand, you pay it back with another hand. Landlords are waiting to see by what percentage salaries will be going up, and then you see the implication. We learned that experience when we had the Udoji Award in 1971 or 72, Udoji Award. That was when we first learned the ripple effects, of wage increase. But that does not mean that when government have introduced policies that particularly have led to the devaluing the salaries of workers, that we should not revisit it. Of course, it has to be revisited. The problem we have is the industrial relations model, which we have currently, which is what I think we need to change. Now, I will tell you exactly what I meant. We follow the German industrial relations model, where every 5 years, you go back and negotiate, and then you agree a percentage or a minimum wage or percentage increases that will last for 5 years in order to ensure stability within the economy, so that workers will not go on strike. Productivity can be maximized. But German economy is the biggest in the whole of Europe, one of the biggest in the world. They have a manufacturing economy, which we don't have. That is one. The second issue is this: not until the IG Metals strike in if I can remember correctly, 1995 or 96, thereabout, that Germany industrial relation system got, checking up. Now, back to our own situation here. It is totally unrealistic to allow inflation in an economy which is largely informal, to allow inflation to eat into the system, erode people's living wages for 5 years, only to come back to the negotiation table and then agree a minimum wage. By what percentage will you be agreeing? Because year on, inflation has been, debasing the people's living income. That is one. Number two, we do not even have any means of social welfare protection for the people. It's not about if you're unemployed, you get paid, certain amount of money as minimum wage to be able to survive. We do not have that system in Nigeria. We should not forget that although it is in Chapter 2 of the Nigerian Constitution, it is not made justiciable. And I would rather prefer the British model. Rather than allowing things to accumulate for a period of 5 years, and now you go into a bitter struggle, to revalue workers' salaries, I would rather prefer a system where on a year-on-year basis, if inflation is 10%, Labour and the federal government can sit down and discuss about how to revalue, salaries, that is salary increment, to the tune of 10% or something near that. And that is the system being done in UK, rather than allow it, to fester, and then it gets to 50% erosion of salaries or 100% erosion of salaries before negotiation. And government will now come up with the argument that, look, this will create inflation. It will further inflate the economy, which they want to run away from. But if this is done on a yearly basis, based on inflation rate, then we are not likely going to have that situation. I think that is what Labour should be pushing for now, to change the industrial relations model.
Okay. So, Mr. Biodun, now in your submission, you had talked about how Labour is seeming to react to economic policies of the government, and because the policies are biting on the workers. So as the representative of the workers, they need to do something. So let's pick out these policies and just open them up a bit, and then before we go into what the government intends to offer in reaction to make up for what the policies are doing to the workers right now, starting with the removal of fuel subsidy, then the increase in electricity tariffs. How have you seen this affecting and making Nigerian workers very poor?
Yeah, there are three major factors largely responsible for the situation we found ourselves in. Two of them created by this government, and the third one not by this government. they inherited. First one is the issue of removal of fuel subsidy. That brought about 250% increase in cost of living when that was done in June last year. The second one is the flotation of Naira, which has brought in about 50% devaluation in the value of a Naira. And the third one, which is not directly attributable to the Tinubu's administration, is the issue of production, which is linked to security, that is food production. Many farmers have not been able to go to their farm. The breadbasket of the country is the Middle Belt, and it's been devastated by clashes between nomadic farmers, and the crop farmers. So we know where the problem is, and government on its own part has been doing its best, by degrading the capacity of Boko Haram, but they have not largely succeeded against banditry and against kidnapping, which were two major issues why farmers are still staying away from farm. What seems to be very clear is that the implications of those three factors has led to a food inflation of over 40%. And then we have the headline inflation of 34% by April, driven largely by food inflation. So if we are able to solve the third factor, which is get the farmers back to farm, give ample support for the farmers to be able to continue production, and then we increase our productivity in terms of crops, we'll be able to solve, largely part of this problem. Do not forget that currently, as of today, we are importing grains from Russia and Ukraine. Both countries are at war, and we are importing grains valued at $5 billion a year. So if we are able to cultivate the land here and produce those grains, we won't have any need to import them. So we'll be able to conserve our foreign reserves and with a view to show up the value of the Naira. The second issue is the issue of PMS. If you're able to get, kickstart our refineries here, and then the refineries are producing, we will also be able to save, foreign exchange to the tune of $25 billion, which we are currently using to import PMS, since the cost of production will be in Naira in Nigeria. So these are measures which needs to be taken to ensure that we are able to deal with that problem. Bring the cost of food down, inflation will come down. We've had all manners of monetary intervention from the CBN, but so far it has not yielded the desired result. So fortunately, we now have the Minister for Finance coming up with fiscal policies. He's already talking about allowing industries to have access to 1 billion Naira loan at 9%. These are fiscal measures to expand the economy, expand production, expand employment, with a view to address some of these problems. How it will be implemented remain, to be seen, because the devil is always in the implementation. But if they're able to implement it successfully, we might be able to bring down inflation within a short possible time. And that would impact on workers' well-being anyway.
If you just joined in, you're listening to Lagos Talks 981 on Smooth 98.1 FM. The conversation this morning is focused of the backdrop of the ongoing labor strike, and that's about labor strike and the way forward right now. And our guest is a special guest, Biodun Sowunmi, public affairs analyst, helping us break down the issues this morning. And we're sure to get the calls in on 0201-448-9981 if you know the way forward as labor it goes into a meeting to know if they'll be heading back to their employers to negotiate once more again or stay in the trenches until their demands are met. You can give us a call on 0201-448-9981. We'd also love to read your messages on 0809-444-0981. And you can as well catch us stream, a glimpse of the stream on youtube.com/smooth981 FM Lagos.
98.1. This is the Smooth Breakfast Show. They always give me joy. Anytime when they cook like this, I can always sit in and put no cube, not add correct vegetables.
Mr. Sowunmi, we'll be with you shortly. We'll do a small
No
breather.
problem.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's fine. That is fine.
I always enjoy my cooking.
never went up, I want more.
You see, all your food with correct vegetables come sitting up with no cube. But that will get delicious taste. Today, chop better.
What can you say about your finances? Let's talk about it, shall we? What can I say about money?
People don't really like to talk about money. Or today,
It's extremely complicated. I think everyone worries about not having money and being broke.
we make money, we spend money.
Poor people complain about money, while the rich discuss money.
It's a rich man's world. Well, for me, my dad invested in businesses, and that's how I started to learn about money.
And as we enter into the workforce, it really becomes you versus the economy.
Then you realize there's little or no money to save, even though you worked hard for it.
So that's why every kobo you earn needs to be stretched as far as it can go.
But sadly,
Nowadays, we no longer spend kobo.
especially when it comes to matching up against the dollar.
Now, let's discuss your finances and simplify its principles for you. Tune in to Personal Finance on Smooth 98.1 every Wednesday from 5:15 p.m. You are listening to the Smooth Breakfast right here on Smooth 98.1.
You're on to Lagos Talks 981 on Smooth 98.1 FM. Let's get back to Biodun Sowunmi this morning as we unpack labor issues and the way forward out of the quagmire. So before you talked about how what's going on is a reaction to the policies of the government and how we can really not turn back the hands of time, but to manage where we are presently, because any increment in salaries would eventually create another fresh set of challenges that would take us back to the same process all over again. So in the spirit of this, the federal government, as at the last time we looked at it, was willing to offer about 60,000 naira. That's the federal level. And why is it seeming like the state governors, they just seem to be invincible in all of this? It's always focused on the federal government.
Yes, you are quite right. Many of the state governments are not comfortable with the joint negotiations simply because the federal government has stand a better chance of being able to implement it, effortlessly.
Mr. Sowunmi, we can hear you right now. Hello, Mr. Sowunmi, your connection, you have to check the connections so we lost your, can you go over that again?
Okay. Bearing in mind that the 36 states of the Federation collect 26% federal allocation, the federal government alone collects 52.68%, a little bit more than the whole 30 times 2 of the whole 36 states of the Federation. So the federal government is in a better position to meet any obligations arising from minimum wage, unlike the states. And when you also bear in mind that the states are not equally endowed, you cannot expect Akwa Ibom, to pay the same amount of money as well as Zamfara. Same thing, Lagos State cannot pay the same exact amount of money like Ekiti State, because some are better endowed than the others, and they get more federal allocation than the others. So we need to take those factors into reckoning to start with. Another major issue is the issue of federalism. When you are in a true federal system as scripted, then the states are the federating units, while the federal government is the coordinating center. Many people have been calling for restructuring, to true federalism. If you are to practice true federalism, the federal government will not go into an obligation along with the states to pay the same amount of money. It will be in line with what each state can afford. And of course, resources will have to be devolved to the states from the center. That's what restructuring is all about, to whittle it down so that the states providing more services closer to the people, they are the federating units, can have more resources to carry out their functions. So many state government tends to be more careful about this kind of agreement. That is why you see that even the 30,000 naira minimum agreed years ago, 5 years ago, has not been fully implemented by many states of the federation, not to talk of local government. If you leave all the major urban areas, many local governments in the core rural part of the country are not really paying the 30,000 naira minimum wage. So that is the major problem. We need to look at the structure of the country, need to look at, do we really want to practice true federalism or not? If you don't want to practice it, then we should agree on that. If you want to restructure the country to true federalism, it also has implications. For instance, it's not only on collective wage negotiation, collective bargaining, it also has implications for local governments, because local governments are not federating parts of the federation in a true federal system. You know, they are supposed to be creation of the states who are the real federating partners. So these are some of the issues, and of course, local government will not be getting, you know, federal allocation. So these are some of the issues which needs to be sorted out. Of course, Labour will prefer a centralized system like this, where they can reach agreement with one body or a group of bodies, you know, grouped into one and agree national across the board. But we have seen that when it comes to implementation, is not always implemented across the board as emphasized.
So in summary, these agreements, even if they reach agreements with the federal government, it is not binding on the state government. So what is the purpose of all of this this struggle if it doesn't connect or bind the state government at the end of the day?
It's supposed to be binding on state government. What you have is you have the state governors represented, you know, because you have 4 people negotiating. One is federal government, you have the state government also there. You also have the organized private sector and the labor unions. Those are the 4 parties in negotiation. Now, the federal government on its own part, you know, through the Federal Ministry of Labor, is trying to reach a compromise between what organized private sector can pay, what the state government says they can pay, and what the federal government can pay. And that is why the figure moved from 58,000 naira, which the organized private sector said they can pay, to 60,000 naira, you know, with a compromise. Now, the problem for everybody is that if they reached an agreement to pay a certain amount of money, how to fund it is a different problem, because we might create a situation where some states that are less endowed can turn around and say, look, we've got to downsize, you know, restructure our civil service with a view to be able to pay what has been agreed. And that will lead to loss of jobs, which labor doesn't want, because it will also impact on their own check of deals on a monthly basis. While at the same time, nobody wants unemployment to increase. The other thing they can do is what they call in human relations, human resources balance, human wastages. When people leave a post, rather than replacing them, they are not replaced. And then gradually, you get other people to do more work for receiving the same amount of money with a view to downsize, technically downsize your workforce. Nobody also wants that. So the solution is we have to reach a figure that both the state government, the organized private sector, and the federal government will be comfortable with. That, for me, is not 494,000 naira, which Labour is asking for. We should be looking at something in the region of 70,000, which Edo State has committed itself to currently, more than even what the federal government is suggesting. We should be looking at 90,000 in my view. I will tell you why. There's a justification for it. You only need to look at the 250% devaluation in people's real income that was brought in by fuel subsidy removal. And we've also had another, 50% brought in through the flotation of Naira. So even if you are to go back to May, before May 2023, we'll be looking at something in the region of 250 to 300% increase to get to that level. But the side effect of it now is that landlords are waiting in the wings. They are waiting to see by what percentage they should increase their own house rent. There are other people also waiting because cost of production will go up. Companies' salaries will go up. So they reflect it on the cost of goods. Same thing would happen to farmers. Cost of producing fertilizer, producing feeds will go up. They will also reflect it. And many farmers will be forced to pay, whatever they call the minimum wage. And that will affect the cost of goods and services in the country. So technically speaking, if you really look at it, whatever is given with one hand is taken back with another hand by other people within the economy. Government tax will increase. So
Just
these
let's go.
are the problems which
Hello, good morning.
are
Just
embedded.
just a moment, Mr. Biodun. Good morning. Your name, location, and what's the way forward as you see the strike by NLC and the government right now? And Chika, you're welcome. Let's get your thoughts across.
Mhm.
In summary, good morning. That's Chika Stove. Mr. Biodun, show me. We ask you to just hold on. You'll be able to
Okay.
react in the short while, and we'll also get calls in, but that will be after now. Just joined in. It's Lagos Talks 981 on Smooth 98.1 FM. Stay tuned.
With no seasoning cubes for that sumptuous taste. Or when you serve it with correct Nigerian salad, cabbage, carrots, lettuce, and a bit of kidney beans. It's both. Season your jollof with the rich taste of no cubes and serve with plenty of vegetables. So go ahead and elevate your meals. Today, eat for good.
This is smooth breakfast on your dial, just the way you like it. Satisfaction guaranteed.
The smooth 98.1 FM and still Lagos Talks 981, and our guest still here, Biodun Sowunmi, public affairs analyst, helping us look at Nigeria, the NLC labor strike, TUC, and the way forward this morning. We just had a call from Chika, who talked about 150,000 naira as the way forward for any meaningful conversation. So it's over to you if you're reacting, Biodun Sowunmi. Still got calls to pick up.
Well, I understand the demand by some people, or the expectation that any minimum wage should be above or should reflect the reality of the economy currently. Many people are looking for a living minimum wage, and they're making a distinction between that and the minimum wage. So a living wage could be up to 150,000. That's correct. But can the economy afford the living wage rather than the minimum wage? Because the reality of the matter is anything that would lead to loss in employment, given the dire state of the economy, should be discouraged. One. Number two, we have a situation where inflation is probably at its highest level currently, record level in our country. So if we create a situation where inflation keeps rising, whatever has been gained will be lost. So the workers eventually will not gain anything in real sense of it. And that has to be taken into consideration. The other factor is the ripple effect of a very high increase, like 150,000. The ripple effect of that is from 30,000, you want to pay 150,000, you are talking of 500%. And 500%, you only need to think about the landlord, who is also going to increase his rent by 500%. The cost to farmers in terms of employment cost will also go up. The cost to manufacturers will go up. Eventually, our goods will not even be competitive within West Africa, not to talk of being able to export it. So what eventually will happen is smuggling will increase, we will lose employment, many farms will have to retrench workers with a view to accommodate that. But when you now look at that, you ask yourself, what have we gained? How many people are in formal employment? Even this strike, what is it about? How many people? We are talking about, in total, about 16 million people are members of NUC, TUC. In total, we have about 45% of our population in any form of formal employment, leaving 55% without any form of formal employment, who are not covered by the national minimum wage, because there is no way how anybody can enforce it. There is no strike action that can enforce that, apart from those in formal employment. Now, when you take, let me give you a good example of a state with a 4 million population and collecting 3.5 billion a month as federal allocation. If you count the figures per population, you are looking at only 8 naira and 8.65 naira, as per head of that population based on federal allocation of 3.5 billion naira. So if that is provided for, and then you only have workers of 700,000 out of 4 million, are you supposed to use all the 8.65 naira per head, which are accumulated together and paid to the state government as federal allocation? Are you supposed to use that to pay salaries alone? What about the majority of other workers, 3.2 million fellow indigents of that state or residents of that state, who are supposed to enjoy either security, health services, education, and some other forms? What about them? Where will the state government get the money to pay for all those? So we need to be more realistic. While we are talking about people in the formal sector, they are not the majority of our people. Most people in the informal sector, or no sector at all, who are not employed, are the vast majority of the people of Nigeria. And therefore, any reasonable minimum wage has to take account of the entitlement of these people with a view to ensure that government is able to invest in social services, including road construction, that they too will benefit from.
All right. Sowunmi, would ask you to pause there. You've touched on the social implication of increase in minimum of these wages if it's not properly checked, what it would even go the opposite of what it was meant to achieve. That was supposed to be the next, but let's get a call in. Hello, good morning. Good morning to you. Name, location, the way forward. Day two. Abbas. Where's Abbas calling from? So what's it looking like in terms of the strike, and how is it affecting you this morning? What's your contribution? Hmm. All right, we've got Abbas's contribution this morning. And so we return to Biodun Sowunmi, our guest this morning. So here we are. Okay, just permission, let's just get one call out of the way. We return to you. Hello, good morning. Soja is first act today, and what's your contribution? Soji's thoughts from Festac. So we go over. Mr. Biodun Sowunmi, in the next 3 minutes, let's get you to begin to help us look at how can we avoid negotiations between government and the employees ever breaking down before they begin to restart it all over again? Can we avoid what we've just seen yesterday?
Yes, it is avoidable. What we need to do is to change the industrial relations model which we are using currently. Our current system is similar to the German system, if not based on the German system, which is a major manufacturing economy in Europe and in the world. The Germans wanted to create stability and ensure that no strike takes place so as to maximize production. So they tend to agree, wage increases and minimum wage, 5 years ahead. And then after 5 years, they will now come back and do the same thing. Not until when they had a metal strike in the 90s, I think 95, 96 each, and that is when the German system got shaken. That so this thing cannot guarantee stability. In our own case, we are a low wage economy, very weak manufacturing base, and therefore we need to look at exactly what we are doing. More than 50% of our economy is in the informal sector. And therefore, we can only negotiate wage increase or minimum wage in line with the rate inflation on a yearly basis, like what is done in UK. We cannot afford to allow it to accumulate for 5 years, only to come back, and then now the government will now claim, oh, if you award a huge amount of money, this will lead to inflation. It will worsen the inflation situation. But if this is done on an annual basis, if inflation is 5%, then negotiations will be around the 5% figure. Maximum, okay, if you can't get the 5%, at least workers will get 3% or 4%. So which will not disrupt or distort the economy in any form. So what we need to do is change the model which we are using currently, to the UK model, which on a yearly basis, once the NBS, National Bureau of Statistics, comes out with the inflation figure, we all know what we are working towards and the likely increment which workers will get, rather than the current system where we are demanding for 500% increment. It's never done anywhere. Labor is demanding for over 1,500% increment. Why should we allow, living wage or the minimum wage to be devalued to that extent? So that's what I think we need to do. Go back to the drawing board, start a new industrial relations model.
We've got a few more questions before we just let you go on the other side. I see a few more calls trying to get in, but we'll get the caller on the other side also. Just make sure you give us a call on 0201 448 9981. We are Smooth 98.1 FM. We're smooth, 98.1 FM. It's Lagos Talks 981, and we're getting conversation out of the way already. Final moments of the show this morning. Let's see if we can get your call on 0201-448-9981. Good morning. Good. I'm well, thank you. Good morning. Name, location? So we're listening. The- Good morning, Dr. Moses. Sums it up. So, Dr. Biodun Sowunmi, your task is cut off now. In summary now, from all that's been said, so we don't end up pouring water in a basket now. Where is the place of price control in all of this? If you even implement the increase in minimum wage?
Yes, what we are doing is operating a free market economy. We should not forget that. So if you want to bring in the issue of price controlling, it means basically that you have shortages. You are not producing enough. If you are not producing enough, we should create the environment, the ambience, the incentive should be introduced to get people to produce more. Currently, our inflation is largely driven by food inflation. So if we are not doing enough of that, with the producing enough crops, creating the secured environment for farmers to operate, there is no amount of farm price control that we can bring in that will solve the problem, because basically there will be shortages. And
So
where you have shortages, you cannot expect farmers to produce below or to sell below the cost price. So what we need to do is to produce more, to force down prices.
So in all of these societies you talked about, whether in the UK, in Germany, the model you talked about earlier on, there isn't the absence, there is the presence of price control and regulation. And these are free market economies. So what makes us different?
I can give you a good example in Europe. In some years ago, Europe had a glut in egg production, and they had to destroy 2 billion eggs just to sustain the minimum price that a farmer expects from egg. This is a case of overproduction, not underproduction. And when we talk about price control, you cannot control prices where you have shortages. We have seen it happen in different countries in the world. It happened in Zimbabwe. It had happened in Venezuela. It used to happen in the old Soviet Union. Once you don't produce enough, there'll be shortages. So you need to go back and stimulate production. Production will drive down cost. And that is the fact of the matter. For instance, we are not producing enough electricity and we're trying to do price cap. How would you encourage investment in that sector if you are not producing enough to start with? It's increase in production that would lead, in a free market economy, that will lead to a reduction, in the cost of goods. So therefore, that is what we need to do: produce more and force down prices, rather than when you have shortages. It's just like Lagos State government saying that they want to control the rent in Lagos. How do you tell a landlord who knew how much he spent in building his property, and some of them through property developers, some of them through loans, and you want to tell them how much to charge, which may not reflect the cost of their repayment? Of course, it will kill that sector. More and more people will leave the sector, and the government does not have the revenue, to build enough houses. So we are in a period of shortage. This is not about price control. This is about production, increasing production.
Thank you very much. It looks like a very fine place for us to say thank you. Smooth one we've had this morning. Our special guest, Biodun Sowunmi, public affairs analyst, helping us understand that NLC strike in perspective and the way forward. And what a guest. The listener, we've also got people who called in this morning. I want to say thank you to Chika, who called in from Marina. We also had Abbas who called in. Soji was able to call in, and Dr. Moses, who also had to do surgeons between New York, Ohio, and all of those places with the wage prices. But again, thank you so much, Biodun Sowunmi, for your time, and wishing you all the best. Have a great day.
And you too. Thank you.